I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to get your career started as a software engineer. Let's start with what languages you should learn. This is where you have to sort of figure out what immediately interests you and what kind of projects you're going to want to work on to practice these newfound skills. I'll be dropping links to tutorials and resources in the description, so if you need a starting point or you want to kind of get a feeling of some of these areas before you really commit to something, definitely check that out and you can sort of follow along and learn each of these skills as you go. The 5 main areas I'll be focusing on in this video are front-end, back-end, mobile development, scripting, and system administration. After we go over these main areas, I'll briefly go over the software and tools that you'll also be using in day-to-day engineering work. If you're interested in web development, making websites from scratch, being the first thing that users see when using an application, designing user interfaces or user experiences, then the front end is definitely what you want to focus on. For front end, I would really suggest a simple roadmap like this, starting with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML will give you the page structure and layout, CSS will be the styling of the page, and JavaScript will be responsible for all the functions of the page. After you know those basics, then you should go to a framework like React, Angular, or Vue. These are the 3 main ones that come up most. It's my opinion that you should probably work on React as it's a highly employable skill, it's pretty much everywhere, and there's a bonus. If you ever do want to get into cross-platform mobile development, you can use React Native, which is a derivative project off of React. It is very important that you don't skip the basics. The fundamentals are going to teach you exactly what these frameworks are doing and will help you decide if a framework is needed for what you're trying to accomplish, because it's not always required and it's not always suggested either. If you're interested in formatting data, working with databases, and delivering all the important information to the front end to make the application work, then backend is definitely what you're going to want to focus on. For backend, there's really 2 different paths I suggest taking. The first is Java, which will teach you very strong programming fundamentals, and then once you know those fundamentals, you can move to something called Spring Boot, which is a service framework that allows you to build REST APIs and connect to websites. The other side is Python. Python will give you pretty strong foundation skills. It's more of a scripting language, so it's less strict with how things work. But once you know Python, there's 2 frameworks that you could jump to. You could jump to Django and Flask. Now, for databases, regardless of which path you pick, you're going to want to learn SQL. I have a whole video about databases and what SQL is, and you should definitely check that out. In terms of the Java approach, you should definitely learn something called MySQL. That works very well with Spring Boot and combines very, very nicely. The other side is something called SQLite. SQLite comes as default with Django, and I believe with Flask as well. If not, it's super easy to work with in Python, and I definitely suggest using that. If you want to make apps for iOS or Android, then your roadmap is pretty set in stone. For iOS, you're going to want to start with Swift and then move on to Objective-C. For Android, it will be Kotlin and then Java. Now, there is an alternative if you want to just write one code base and have it used for both iOS and Android. And that alternative is React Native. I mentioned it before in the front end bit, and that's because it's more similar to a front end language than it is to Swift or Kotlin. So if you want to go the cross-platform route and write one code base using React Native, I highly suggest you follow the front end roadmap instead of one of these. If you love the idea of automating tasks or web scraping and fetching information from websites, doing machine learning or camera vision or anything like that, then scripting is what you're going to want to focus on. Without a doubt, the language that you need to know for scripting is Python. There's tons of packages online, there's resources everywhere, and pretty much everybody uses it for this kind of thing. So you'll never have a hard time finding an answer to one of your questions. Now, learning Python and learning scripting gets a little blurry when it comes to a roadmap, because there's a lot of things that you could do with scripting and there's a lot of ways that you could learn Python. What I would do is I would probably pick a first project and try to estimate what packages are needed for that and search online and find what other people are doing for it. So a couple of notable examples would be if you want to make something with automation or web scraping, you probably want to learn the package Selenium. If you want to do something in machine learning, you probably want to learn PyTorch or TensorFlow. If you want to do anything in camera vision, OpenCV is definitely the package that you want. And some other honorable mentions of packages in Python are Pillow for image manipulation and creation, NumPy for anything scientific or graph related or numbers or anything, and natural language processing should definitely be using NLTK. Finally, the unsung hero of technology stacks everywhere. System administrators have the most important role, in my opinion, of anybody else in the technology stack. If you want those backends and front ends to even operate, then you need to have a system administrator to run the servers. If you love the idea of running the servers, doing the networking, working with operating systems, building tooling to make other developers' lives easier, and making sure everything stays up, then system administration is definitely what you're going to want to focus on. For systems administration, it gets a little complicated. I would probably start by learning one of the languages that you're going to come across most. That's going to be either Bash or Python, which are two scripting languages. Once you know those scripting languages, you're going to want to go on to C and C++. It's not massive that you know this super well, but it's definitely going to come in handy. Once you have that, you're going to want to move on to operating systems. Now there's two different paths that you can take with operating systems. You can go a Linux distribution path and learn something like Ubuntu, or you could go the Windows path and learn Windows Server. If you really want a wide range of possible jobs, I would highly suggest learning something like Ubuntu. Once you pick your operating system, you're going to want to learn how to serve content on the web. And for that, you're going to need a web server. If you picked a Linux distribution like Ubuntu, you're going to want to use something called Apache HTTP Server. That's going to teach you all the configuration that you need for the networking and how to serve things like microservices or backends or websites. Likewise, if you pick something like Windows, you're going to want to use the built-in tool called IIS. After you've done that, the roadmap sort of gets like a choose your own adventure story. You get to pick what areas interest you and explore them. Some of the notable ones that I suggest looking into is installing databases, using Docker, or just root level software networking. System administration is not the prettiest and it's far from the easiest to learn, but it is a super valuable skill to have. If this is something that interests you, I really suggest learning at the same time as something else, like maybe backend, because then you'll be able to build backend projects and then install your own databases and build your own tooling and run the servers and the networking. So you kind of get the best of both worlds without boring yourself just working with operating systems all day. All right, those are the main areas that you could focus on. Now let's jump into the software and tools. First off, you're gonna need an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, and that's basically the window where you're gonna be writing all your code. Some suggestions are Visual Studio Code or Atom, and some more hands-on where the software is really helping you write code would be IntelliJ or Visual Studio, not to be confused with Visual Studio Code. My personal favorite is Atom for front ends and scripting and IntelliJ for backends. If you're doing mobile development, then you're really stuck with Xcode for iOS development on Mac OS and Android Studio for anything that involves Android. Git is also a super important tool that you're going to use a lot in day-to-day work. Git is basically a tool that allows you to save incremental changes to your code and have different versions of it going at the same time. It's super helpful when writing large code bases. GitHub is a place to save all those incremental changes and version control that you have in Git. GitHub is a massive platform that hosts different repositories, open source projects, and allows you to make edits to other people's code, check out other projects, download their code, upload your own code, offer suggestions, open issues. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and it's super important that you know it, but it's relatively easy because it's really just a website that connects with Git. So learn Git and then move on to GitHub. To wrap this up, let me just break down what I think you should do one more time. Pick an area that you want to focus on out of front end, back end, mobile development, scripting, or system administration. Pick an IDE that you like to use and works for what you're trying to focus on. Most likely that's going to be Visual Studio Code. Once you have that, learn the basics of your roadmap. And only once you're done learning the basics, then move on to learn Git and GitHub. Don't try to do it at the same time. It's just going to end up confusing you. It's going to add a whole bunch of information that you don't need all at once. And that's it. Go ahead and build cool shit. If you have any questions, please leave them below in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe and leave a like. I have a lot of other videos on this channel that go over a lot of the same software engineering stuff, so definitely stay tuned and check those out. One of the ones that comes to my mind right now is a vaccine locator that I made. I helped over 55,000 Canadians by designing a system that aggregated all the data and served it. You should definitely check it out. It's a lot to explain right now, but I explain it really well in the video. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later. Ciao.